Hello again, everybody. Again, my name is Greg Belkin. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Flowsome. Thank you so much for joining us today in this great webinar, How Large International Organizations Strengthen Their Salesforce Relationships by Building a Center of Excellence. And we are really going to be focusing heavy on navigating complexity in implementation and management. And just a few quick logistical items before we get started. Today's presentation is scheduled to be about 40 or so minutes. We're going to mute the lines. However, please feel free to add in any questions that you might have. We'll try and get to them at the end. Thanks so much. And now I'm going to pass it off to Scott, who's going to begin the presentation. Scott, over to you.
Hi, Greg. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. So thank you very much for being here. I'm joined with, as our guest here, Paul Cobes from Cargill, where we're going to talk about his journey through a Center of Excellence. Before we get started, though, we're going to get to some front ends, kind of set this tone for our conversation, which is that execution becomes excellence when you master it. And it's about making it the heartbeat of your organization. Thanks to Robin Sharma, best-selling author, who brought this quote forward. I highly recommend reading some of his content. This spoke to me as I was developing this content and working with Paul in the several conversations that we had both on the line and whilst at Dreamforce. Our agenda today is to talk about the complexities that are happening in the Salesforce ecosystem. As we all know, Salesforce has expanded quite a bit over its 25 years. So how do you manage that and deal with that, coupled with addressing that complexity through a Center of Excellence? Then we'll jump into Paul's content on the journey that they're taking with their Center of Excellence, come back with some best practices and key benefits with a little Q&A at the end, and then we should finish up. So that's our agenda. Let's get started. So Paul is the global CRM lead at Cargill. He's been there for a little over 5 years and 7 months. Before that, he was at 3M, and he's been involved in the Salesforce ecosystem for quite some time. When he's not dealing with Salesforce at Cargill, he does volunteer in his community, and I appreciate any time that I get to work with someone that gives so much back to their community. And he was an alumni of University of Minnesota. Paul, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you sharing your insights in the journey that you're taking Cargill through in developing and implementing the Center of Excellence. Tell us more about you and tell us more about Cargill.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, and thanks to the extended Flowsome team and all the products and services that you guys have delivered to us. It's been a privilege working with you guys and your team. So a little bit about Cargill. We're huge, and that's an understatement at best. 160,000 employees, 160 years old, 160 billion in revenue. We're big. So we break the mold in a lot of aspects of our business. If you have to put us in a box, agribusiness is where we usually end up, but we're literally in everything, financial services, metals, transportation, anything that has anything to do or adjacent with food and food production. In our orientation, they say that about 85% of what you consume on a day is somehow related to Cargill, whether there's a texturizer or that food was transported by or something related to Cargill. We've got a lot of Salesforce orgs. I've got about 12,000 users internationally. And then related to this conversation, of course, we are measuring our deployments and how much we're doing. We do a minimum, if you're counting sandboxes and all that, we do over 100 deployments per month. But the last thing I'll say is on this one is related to Cargill. Those businesses that are listed there. When you talk to the stakeholders within each of them, there's always something unique about the customer and the way that they bring value to the customer. One of the jobs that we're trying to do is continue to do that and to help to continue to differentiate, but also in parallel to show where we're common and where we can be better together and at scale. And it's an ongoing journey, and looking forward to talking more about it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. And I'm an avid fan of Cargill. My family's in the agricultural business, and I've driven by many of your facilities in my travels over the years, and been on site a few times in my time. So thank you again. All right, so let's talk about the challenges at hand. Salesforce is complex, and it's getting more and more complex with every acquisition, with everything that they bring to the table. But it's a fantastic platform. The things that we can do to extend and deliver value to the business is amazing. And having been in the ecosystem for close to 20 years, I've seen it from the old classic interface with the S controls to the Lightning Web Components and all the stuff that we can do today. And there's so much more potential. But with those complexities that we face, we have challenges that, lack of standardization, the higher cost associated with it, the challenges with deploying solutions from for our business users sometimes may have quality issues. And if we're not aligned strategically, things just don't work. And so you have to kind of organize this stuff so that you can be much more efficient. But if you're not, then you run into challenges. Gardner and Forrester have done surveys over the years and say that in 50% of CRM programs fail. Now that's holistically, that's all CRM, including Salesforce and other vendors. But in their research, they found that in some of those risk factors of those failures, it included lack of cross-functional coordination, no business case, lack of process, and much, much more. That's an impact, and it's an impact to the business. There's a risk of non-compliance, increased costs to the business because there's lack of execution, key dependency on personnel, and what happens if they leave, and of course, complex vendor management situations with all the different app exchanges, apps, and all the different burdens that might come about. So then what's the answer? How do you address this? And that's where a Center of Excellence comes into play. A Center of Excellence helps establish centralized expertise, provides strategic guidance, facilitates collaboration, and helps monitor and optimize the performance of the organization. Doing it right helps you achieve the objectives that you're trying to accomplish. A Center of Excellence is many parts. At its nucleus, of course, is the business and process management. Then there's the processes around requirements, release, and knowledge. And eventually it's the value management and the continuous improvement that goes into driving a full-fledged Center of Excellence. And Flowsum provides the foundations to allow you to build out that Center of Excellence. Now, building a Center of Excellence is a journey. Some start in the very basics of a project-based governance model, evolve to an advisory board where your executives get more and more involved, but it's still a run the business motion. Evolve then to a program office, which offers more organization and consistent and formal processes and adherence to best practices. And eventually you get to that Center of Excellence, which focuses on those long-term objectives and the ROI, TCO metrics that are important for a business. Here you get to self-sufficiency. In that journey, it takes time and effort to get there. The results, though, are plentiful. It's the ability to have standardization, innovation can be accelerated, and strategic alignment with your business users so that you're achieving the results that they're after. So then now let's turn our attention towards Cargill, and so let's talk, Paul, tell us more about your journey and how the Center of Excellence has been established and the things that you're doing to drive that transformation.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. You highlighted it's a journey. It's long. It's taken many years. The challenge, starting there, we were very project oriented. As you showed in the previous slide. The story goes, there was about 100 people in the space, and we were largely outsourced with our third party vendors. And so having many different projects and many different, silos of individualized goals across Cargill was difficult, and it was challenging to move fast, right? And especially in the technology landscape, that's always the demand that's watching our back, is that we're getting pressure to move faster. So that was kind of the challenge that we wanted to meet to, is how do we move faster, and then how do we bring down some of our costs that are associated to that. So the solution is that we wanted to start building a community of practice, right? And we'll talk a little bit about our talent strategy and how we get there, but we also wanted to start in a place where we knew we could bring some immediate value. And DevOps was the one of the centers of excellence, one of the communities of practices that we started out. And we did this because we knew it's something that we could measure right away, and we knew we could show an ROI on that investment. So the engagement from the team and really wanting, one of the benefits is really wanting to allow our team to be able to focus on the value that matters. So, and related to DevOps and moving code through the system and executing on a change set isn't always the most exciting thing that one of our sales engineers can spend time on. So being able to bring that to the team was a huge benefit, as well as being able to meet all of the other needs within Cargill, whether it's our GitHub requirements or SonarQube or those things that were required from a technology standpoint. But that last bullet point on there, I think, is pretty strong, right? Within 3 or 4 months, we were able to get our deployments to be about 70% more effective. So a huge turnaround on the DevOps front. And then we'll talk about some of our other centers of communities of practices, but we took this model and replicated it across other functional areas as well.
Thank you, Paul, for this. Let's dive more into, you mentioned communities practice, but in talent, but tell us more around what were the big ticket items that you were focused on in that initial journey.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we had about 100 people in the space. And so that was largely vendor driven. And one of the things that we decided that we needed to do first was develop a talent strategy, right? Those independent projects and independent programs that were operating, they were operating very well, right? And there's a lot of great partners that are out there in the space that were providing excellent, great talent to those. But in order to go faster, what we needed to do is we needed to bring some thought leadership into Cargill. So that was one area where we started on. Then we looked towards our communities of practices. So once we have the talent in-house and we have some people's in the right seats on the bus, what is it that they're going to be working on? How are they going to be brought together? Because we knew that once this talent, once these people were brought in to their roles, that they were going to be in different spots, right, within the organization. So what's that common thread that was going to bring them together? So we needed to have a tool, a mechanism to bring those skill sets together, and our communities of practice is the way that we structured that. And then at the end of it, the stakeholder alignment, I mean, this continues to be a work in progress and is always a shifting part of the puzzle, so to speak. But this is where we can communicate with our stakeholders, right, and show what is the value that we've done, how are we continuing to bring value to the space, and what are the areas where we might need to continue to either expand to or to operationalize. With the communities of practices, they're evolving, right? Sometimes there's new ones starting, other times there are ones retiring and bring into an operational. So it's a constant journey between the three.
Okay, well, let's dive into each one of these. So let's start first with a little bit more detail on your talent strategy and the challenges you faced and the resolution or the journey you're on and where you're going.
Yeah, so the first question was, okay, like once we had support and leadership support and we got the green light to go forward on some of the stuff, like the first question is, where do we start? And where we ended up on that was, well, let's start with our thought leaders, right? And so we went after product managers, we went after technical architects, we went after some senior engineers or admins, and we really wanted to build that network, right? And that one was to have kind of a twofold purpose, but one of them was to continue to have career paths as we're bringing these people in. But then the second part of that was, I mentioned that there was a large, third-party footprint at Cargill already. Having these thought leaders on the team first allows those those third parties to move faster themselves, right? Because now there's a continuous presence from Cargill to be able to knowledge transition, to be able to ask and clarify any of the questions that are being asked of that team. So the productivity and efficiency goes up on both ends, right? It makes us more efficient internally, and our vendor partners more efficient as well. You know, customer satisfaction and reducing turnover and retaining the right talent. You know, once we have this vehicle in place where you can see what is it that what's the machine, and how do ideas, how do concepts go through the system and get designed, get built, get released. That's attractive to talent, right? They want to know that they're going to be coming into a system where they can add value. And that was a part of the talent strategy, is to be able to show that and communicate that to the team members as they're coming on board.
Paul, you mentioned something that resonated with me, and having done numerous Salesforce deployments in my time at Salesforce, I saw this repeatedly, working with customers that didn't have the expertise, but the SIs did. And we all love the SIs for the work that they can do to get something up and running, but without that balance of the internal talent, they understand how the business works, they understand how things flow within the business, but they didn't understand how Salesforce worked. And so you had this big chasm. How did you manage that? I assume you had that chasm, that issue. How did you manage through that to get your thought leadership of internal users up to speed on Salesforce quickly?
Yeah, I think at that level, it's really a question of involvement and being included in the overall purpose and mission of a company, right? So as an SI, when they're showing up, to your point, they show up really well, and they do their job, and they know Salesforce, and they know how to build it. Once you have that connective tissue around, hey, this is what we're doing as Cargill, right? We want to build and feed the world in a safe and sustainable way. That becomes a very powerful mission. And if you can reinforce that and build that culture within the team, being able to show up and know what your purpose and what your value is on a day-to-day basis becomes a really cool part of the story.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, let's move on then to the next topic, which was the benefits of having a community of practice. Tell us more about what it took to set this up, where was your focus, and what did you learn by setting these up?
Yeah, so we started in two different areas. So as that new talent was coming on, and we were onboarding our talent strategy, one of the questions that a lot of people were asking first is like, hey, where is this documented, right? How do we learn about what you guys did in the past, or what those decisions were made? So we started around like documentation, like how do we show what it is that we build, what do we configure, so that can continue to be passed down. The other area that we started was DevOps. A lot of our talent, as they were showing up too, their other big question was like, hey, where's our pipeline? How do we automate some of this stuff? I want to go and I want to learn how to do Agentforce, or I want to go and I want to do some data cloud stuff. I don't want to be responsible for doing a change set and deploying to production on a Friday night. So we knew that there was an immediate story around building the continuity for the business, but also around the talent and being able to provide exciting things for our teams to be able to do. So that was, that facilitates that common knowledge sharing, right? Having an identified skill or focus area, a functional area where you're going to be bringing people together, allows that. And it does happen, that those conversations start to produce, side conversations around, how did you do this? How did you do that? And there's always room for improvement, but we've seen some of those, and that's an area we're trying to continue to enhance, right? How do we bring this piece of the puzzle that this group over here did very well, and how do we share it? How do we translate it, put it into a common language, and then bring it somewhere else in the business? That takes time, it takes practice, it takes community, it takes stakeholders, but it's an ongoing process.
In creating the documentation, getting people on board, etc. Did you ever find, and I'm sure you did, but did you ever find challenges where things like communications broke down and you had to get in the middle of it, or orchestrate, or do some level of getting people aligned and focused?
Yeah, I mean, certainly that happens. I think what naturally we've seen in those areas is that when we have that talent strategy as the backbone, and now we have, Cargill thought leaderships that are on those teams, and they're showing up with a sense of purpose in a safe, psychologically safe environment, suddenly it becomes much more incentivized and much more attractive to grab onto those types of things, right? And at having a Cargill resource there on these functional teams allows for interconnection then, whether it's up and down the chain or laterally across some of the other teams, it's easier to engage with those types of things and filter out the conversation as needed.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. I've learned a lot in your process here. And I hope everyone else in the webinar is too. There'll be questions later on in the end that you can pose to Paul as we get towards the end of the webinar. Let's move on to the third pillar, which is your stakeholder alignment. Tell us how you were able to, I would say, wrangle in or corral your stakeholders and get them to the table. How did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm smiling on this one a little bit because this one is I think I said it before, this continues to be a part of the journey and will always be there. In particular, Cargill right now is going through some pretty major strategic changes. So we are, using this muscle, continuing to strengthen it and try to understand who are our stakeholders now. How do we communicate with them? What level do we communicate with them on? What are their objectives? Those are all questions that are happening now as we restructure and try to go after more focused, corporate strategy objectives. And so it continues to be a journey. I would say that the muscles that we developed earlier with this, those questions come back, right? And some of them are on here, like prioritize. How do we prioritize this? How do we bring those things together, and how do we look at things from the old two lenses, IT and business, right? How do we look at this from a technology and from a process standpoint? Those are engagement questions that force us to answer the questions of like who and when and at what level do we need to engage those stakeholders. Again, varying levels of success, and it's taken years to do, but I think we've reached a point in our maturity now where even when we have a major strategic change that's being announced, this is now part of our DNA, and it gives us strength to be able to walk through some of these questions. So it's still a challenge. It's still hard. It still has a lot of change to manage through it, and throw a couple of new leaders and some new positions in there as well, and it becomes complex. But at least we have the framework there to be able to help and guide us.
Do you do any kind of onboarding for your executives, like sit them down and walk them through the process, walk them through you're part of the business and what you're doing to deliver value and help them understand what's going on?
I would say kind of. I mean, it's ad hoc, right? The kind of the repeatable, scalable of a process is not there, just because there's been quite a bit of change and quite a few new leaders recently. But it's something that we aspire to, and where we're at right now is really just trying to stay grounded in the language of like, hey, how can we communicate across this broad group? So whether we talk to our CIO on one day or our chief customer officer the next day, like how do we bring that message together so that it has some consistencies, so that we enable that leadership ecosystem then to know who we are and what's important to us.
Okay, excellent. All right, so then, as you and I chatted both at Dreamforce and beforehand, your journey has obviously delivered a lot of productivity to the organization. Tell us about how you're measuring it and what the frequency of it is and who your audience is, of course, that is receiving these updates.
So at a really high level, I would say, we kind of have three different audiences. One is our internal, kind of close to the team, people that are close to Salesforce, right? There's one level of metrics that those people are looking at. What are we measuring there? We're measuring, our sprints, our user stories, our test automation, how many scripts we're running. Measuring everything related to DevOps and all those things. And we can really get pretty deep on those types of levels, right? We have another level, which is where we bring our businesses together, right? And we use the term product owners for those that represent the different businesses. So what are we doing at a platform level? What are we doing in terms of unlocking new feature sets, new capabilities? What are we doing that as it compares to this Salesforce, the platform, their roadmap, right? Of course, everyone's asking about Gen AI and Agent Force and all these things at Dreamforce that are talked about. So that's another question that we have, another elevation of conversation that we have with that group. And then our third group, again, just high level, is like our executive involvement. Like how much value are we getting? Are we asking the right questions? Are we getting connected to the customer? Are we making an effective use of our dollars that are invested here? Are we connecting the ecosystems to really keep us on track there? So those are kind of the three pillars in terms of alignment that we use. And as it relates to DevOps and specifically Flowsome, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves on here, right? I mean, 85% of our teams, and what that number means is our product teams. So 85% of our product team members have a better experience with Flowsome being there. And over half of them had quantifiable time savings that were immediately recognized. So the journey is worthwhile. It's as much about the journey as I would say as some of these end results, because those journeys can feed into other things, whether it's DevOps or documentation, as we talked about. There's also other communities of practices that we've expanded around architecture review, integration, our org health, and different things where we've brought those functional areas that need to be aligned across different instances of Salesforce, and we continue to have a structure built where they can share.
Well, congratulations on some really impressive numbers here, and I'm excited to see what the next 6 months to a year unfolds as you guys continue to ramp up your Center of Excellence. All right, so folks, we heard from Paul the work that he's been doing to drive the Center of Excellence and the value. Now let's talk about the best practices and the key benefits of having a Center of Excellence and why it's important for you to start thinking about it. First off, the importance of a Center of Excellence is the ability to align business needs and IT capacity, streamline your deployment and development processes, improve visibility and mitigation of that risk, and the thing that is the most important is delivering ongoing value to the business. This is the whole purpose of a Center of Excellence, particularly a Salesforce Center of Excellence, delivering that value to the business. The best practices of setting up a Center of Excellence include the vision and the objectives. Paul shared that they have a mission, they have their vision and the values that they are aligned around. And having done several large deployments of Salesforce in the past, having that mission statement, the guiding principles, and the metrics plastered up on the walls that everyone recites before every meeting that they're going to work on something in Salesforce, I saw value in. So I highly recommend it. Helps you get alignment, delivers velocity, quality, and optimization. Having a governance framework is key. Ensuring that you have consistent processes in place and policies to ensure that things stay on the road. Promoting a culture of collaboration. Paul shared his talent strategy, communities of excellence that allows them to come in and share knowledge and improve the teamwork. And then continuous integration and deployment of your solutions using automation, which we here at Flowsome offer you those solutions. And then monitoring and continuously improving your processes repeatedly so that you can get the value out of your investments, both in Salesforce and other solutions. So how do we, Flowsome, help you? We help you in that deployment velocity. We help you in the efficiency of your development. We help you in better release visibility and risk mitigation. The benefits are streamlined deployments, automating manual processes, improving the release quality, increasing visibility and control, and mitigating risk, amongst many others. And we encourage you to explore and learn more of what you can get out of Flowsome by interacting with your sales and customer success or team members that you work with. With that, we're going to shift into a Q&A session. I'm sure everyone has a bunch of questions. I'm having a list here. The first one I'm going to ask you, Paul, you shared how your talent strategy improved Cargill's DevOps. What should a customer who's establishing a center of excellence consider when creating a talent strategy that attracts and develops top DevOps professionals to support their Salesforce initiatives?
Yeah, good question, Scott. I mean, I think for me the most important part was determining what is the structure of the team going to look like. What would be the mobility and flexibility and evolution of a team member as they come in. I think that was a really important question that was asked when we were hiring and opening roles. So what's my next job, right? How do we convey to them that we're going to have a plan so that when you come in, if you're going to come in as an engineer, you can move to a senior engineer, you could move to a BA, you could go over to the business, right? You could go over to an adjacent portfolio. So having a sense of growth, not just within Salesforce, right? But anywhere, was a very important thing. And then I think probably the most important thing, I think, is having the right leader in place, right? Having the right people, the right leader that can engage with that person and produce a sense of inclusion, build a sense of purpose, build that culture. We're, in the technology space, we need a psychologically safe space where people can throw out ideas. They can challenge people and be okay to fail. And that's a very important part of the puzzle that needs to come together.
Excellent. Thank you. And so true, having a psychologically safe space to try ideas and throw it against the wall and see what sticks. Again, we chatted about this several times now, but you shared that your communities of practice, when you focused on architecture, integration, and a couple areas, including process. But what communities of practice, in your opinion, should a customer who's establishing a center of excellence establish to drive better knowledge sharing and standardization of their processes?
I think my head goes to two places. Like, one, there's all kinds of and endless. There's an endless amount of things that you could do on the technology side. There's also a lot of things that need to be done on the business and process side. So how do we balance those? For us, I don't know if it was an advantage or not, but we knew there was so much to do on the technology side, and bringing that forward, that's where we decided to focus, right? We said DevOps is something that we need. We need a framework. We need a pipelines and management, all that. We said QA, quality engineering was going to be an important part, and that was a natural extension too of the code management best practices and being able to test things and build automation. And it very naturally fed into our ROI and automation and all those things that we were trying to bring together. So that's the path that we went down, is trying to build a really strong, technology operation, governance framework. I think it's dependent on, the different maturity of where you're at. That's where we started.
Okay. Greg, I've asked a bunch of questions that we had from before we started the webinar. Do you have any questions from the audience that we should throw the ball?
Yeah, it sounds good. There's a little bit of a work completed question that came in, and it's of course up to you how detailed you want to get here. But the question is, how does your Salesforce team demonstrate work completed? Is it through sprint reviews, a newsletter, in-app guidance? Curious about your audience formats and cadences for these type of engagements.
So we have a lot of different formats for that. Once the release and kind of I think what the question is around, like, hey, once the work's done, like, how are you communicating? How are you change management? And how are you bringing your users along? That at Cargill sits with our product owners, as I mentioned before, right? And those teams that are engaging directly with them. So we're seeing them, and we're adjacent to it, of course. So we see, some of them go through a Teams notice. Other ones, they have, monthly meetings where they get their champions together and they review those functionalities, and then they move them forward. So I think there's a lot of different tools that work. just kind of knowing who your change agents are and what works well for that particular group of people is an important thing to spend some time on before throwing out something that might just be easy for us to be able to communicate those changes to. So I would spend time getting to know the people, the leaders, and the change agents in particular who's driving those changes, what works best for them.
Mhm. Got it. Another one, a little bit on the technical side. How does Cargill perform segregation of duties or SOD audits within DevSecOps? You have a process for that.
Yes, and I think we do, but it might be at a higher level than maybe where the question is going. One of the parts that we try to do with this process is to have a way that we could enforce those types of things. So one of the things that we're trying to get in place, and I think we're there if we're not close yet, is that anybody that's moving code from that last step into production is a Cargill resource, right? And then there's a breakdown of the different access points and the different roles and responsibilities on who's promoting code and moving those environments from lower environments up until then. So we have some semblance of a segregation of duties there. We kind of floated around this idea of a DevOps specific team that would be internalized to Cargill, and we've gone back and forth on this a little bit. So I think there's room for improvement on how do we do that and how do we do that most effectively so that we can get the time to value as low as possible. But it's an ongoing thing. We started very high, and we're continuing to work at it. So I don't know. I hope that answers the question at least at a high level.
Mhm. Great. Another question. Based on your experience, what are the key steps to setting up a Salesforce COE and ensuring alignment with business and IT goals?
I think the two key things are, one is building the stakeholder alignment, right? And who are the people that need to come together on this. And I think usually having an idea of how far that spans, it usually goes, a click or two further than I would ever think. Like there's always a conversation where, especially at Cargill, like a huge corporation, right? Like I'm continuing to find people in the space where it's like, oh gosh, I didn't even know you were here and you existed. You're now one of my stakeholders, and so having a process to be able to do that. The one other thing I would say, and this is kind of colloquial, but like decide how you're going to decide, right? I mean, getting a group of people together and stakeholders from varying different programs and different functions, they are all, when you get together, you are all leaders, right? And you are all decision makers in some capacity. So a lot of times everyone's going to think that the decision is theirs to make. So trying to figure out like, okay, now we have this group of stakeholders together. You're responsible for this functionality. You're responsible for this domain over here, and I'm responsible for this. How in the world are we going to decide this together? And that's something that is a muscle to work through and figure out how to do that.
Mhm. Got it. Another one, what common challenges, and I think you touched on this a little bit during your presentation, but maybe if you want to just flesh it out a little bit more, what common challenges should organizations watch out for when setting up a Salesforce COE, especially in governance and stakeholder engagement?
Yeah, I think so. Sounds like we've talked on that one a little bit, but to click into it, bringing people along on the journey, I would
Mhm.
say, especially if you're going to build a center of excellence, right? Because the perception is always that, oh gosh, here's corporate, here's the center trying to reach in and trying to gain control of XYZ platform or whatever it is. And bringing them along on the journey to say, no, we're not trying to tell you which car to buy. We're trying to tell you that once you pick out a car that you want to buy, you should wear a seatbelt. And here's the seatbelt that you should wear, right? When you're there, giving and working through analogies like that so that they understand, like, okay, I can still pick out the car that I want. I get to pick the model and all those things. They're asking for some of these things to be a part of the journey. That takes a little bit of time to develop. So that would be the area that I would encourage people to watch out for.
Mhm. Cool. And I see our timer dwindling here, but maybe if I can sneak one more in here. Does Cargill have a formal process for onboarding external implementation partners and or new employees who will be hands-on with the Salesforce app?
Great question. Formal, I would say it's loosely formal, right? And there's always, people that are coming into different areas, right? So if you're a sales rep, right, and you're coming in and you need to learn the framework, like yes, I'm aware of, change agents and change leadership that have, playbooks and programs and everything that they onboard you through, right? If you're coming in somewhere else, there's different processes and whatnot to it. So yes, I think it's an important part of giving people, I mean, those first 2 weeks are in critical importance to be able to give people a sense of structure and how to get their work done. So we have some stuff. It's not quite as formal as I would ever like it to be, but it's an important part of the journey.
Got it.
I think that's a very important part. I will echo that. And I've talked to several customers that have been building just that, an onboarding program for SI partners that they're bringing in. So they adhere to the governance process, they adhere to how they're using Flowsum, et cetera. So highly recommend that for anyone that's setting up a COE. Build it, work with us. We've got run books, et cetera, that we can help you with on the Flowsum side that you can use to establish that kind of framework. Since we're at time, or coming up at time, let's finish out and just with a little advertisement from our marketing team. But we are a leading provider of Salesforce DevSecOps solutions, and we love helping our customers streamline their Salesforce governance and deliver value through improved processes. So we'd love to work with you. Learn more by interacting with us on our sales organization or our customer success organization. We're here to help you get to value. And with that, we want to thank everyone for attending. Thank you, Paul, for being with us today and sharing your insights and your journey through your Center of Excellence. And thank you for being a fantastic customer.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.